My name is Sophia Bennett. I'm 34 years old, and until recently, I thought the biggest downside of apartment living was hearing someone's dog bark at 2 in the morning. I was wrong. It turned out the worst part was sharing a laundry room with someone who believed everyone else's money belonged to them. I had lived in the same apartment complex for almost 4 years. Nothing fancy, just a quiet 6-story building with about 80 units. The rent was reasonable. The neighbours mostly kept to themselves, and aside from the occasional package delivered to the wrong door, life was pretty peaceful. The only inconvenience was the shared laundry room in the basement. There were 12 washers, 12 dryers, all of them older commercial machines that had been upgraded with a phone app. Instead of feeding quarters into the machines, you selected one with the app, paid digitally, and started the cycle from your phone. Simple. Convenient. At least, that's how it was supposed to work. I usually did laundry on Saturday mornings. The room was quieter. Most people were either sleeping in or running errands. I had a routine. 3 loads. Whites, colours, towels and bedding. I'd start all 3 washers, head back upstairs to clean my apartment, then return about 30 minutes later to move everything into the dryers. I'd been doing it exactly the same way for years, until one Saturday, something felt off. When I walked into the laundry room, one of my washers had already stopped. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was finding my clothes sitting in one of the dryers, still soaking wet, covered in soap. For a second, I thought maybe I'd accidentally moved them myself and forgotten. Then I realised how ridiculous that sounded. I'd only left 25 minutes earlier. There was no way. I looked inside the washer. Someone else's clothes were washing, using the cycle I had paid for. I stood there for several seconds, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Maybe someone had mixed up the machines. Maybe they thought theirs had finished. Maybe it was an honest mistake. I moved my wet clothes back into the washer, started another rinse cycle at my own expense, and tried not to think too much about it. The following weekend, it happened again. This time, 2 of my loads had been removed. My damp clothes were stuffed into dryers that weren't even turned on. Another person's laundry was happily spinning away inside the washers I'd paid for. I checked my phone. The app clearly showed the transactions. 3 completed payments, 3 active machines. Everything had started under my account. Someone had simply waited until I left, then taken them. I reported it to the leasing office on Monday morning. The property manager sounded sympathetic. "I'm sorry that happened. We'll remind everyone not to touch other residents' laundry." I blinked. "That's it? What else can you do?" She hesitated. "Unfortunately, we don't have cameras inside the laundry room. Unless someone actually sees who's doing it, there isn't much we can prove." I thanked her anyway, but as I walked back to my apartment, one thought kept running through my head. Whoever was doing this knew exactly what they were doing. The 3rd time, I stopped believing it was a coincidence. 3 weekends, 3 different Saturdays, 3 paid laundry cycles stolen. The same pattern every single time. Wait until I left, take my clothes out, use my machines, use my detergent, leave me to pay all over again. This wasn't confusion. It wasn't carelessness. It was theft. Small theft, but theft all the same. The following Saturday, I decided to try something different. Instead of coming back when the app told me the cycles were finished, I returned 5 minutes early. I wasn't expecting what I found. All 3 of my washing machines had been opened. My clothes had already been dumped into dryers, still dripping wet, still covered in soap, and all 3 washers were already running again, filled with someone else's laundry. I slowly looked around the empty laundry room. Whoever had done it couldn't have been far away. At that moment, I wasn't angry anymore. I was curious. Because someone wasn't just stealing my laundry cycles. They were watching me closely enough to know exactly when I'd leave. And if they were bold enough to do it 3 weekends in a row, I had a feeling I wasn't the only victim. I stood there in the middle of the laundry room, staring at 3 washing machines that were no longer washing my clothes. Someone had timed it perfectly. They hadn't interrupted the cycles halfway through. They'd waited until only a few minutes remained. Just enough time to pull my soaking wet clothes out, throw them into random dryers, and immediately claim the washers before anyone else could. That wasn't luck. That was planning. I looked around the room again, completely empty. No forgotten laundry baskets, no detergent bottles, no jackets hanging over folding tables. Whoever had done this had disappeared in less than 5 minutes. Almost like they'd been watching the app. Or watching me. I restarted my laundry for the second time that morning. Another payment, another full wash cycle. As the machine filled with water, I couldn't stop thinking about one question. Why mine? There were 12 washing machines in that room. People came and went all day. Yet somehow, the same person kept choosing my laundry. That afternoon, I knocked on the door of my next-door neighbour, Mrs. Alvarez. She'd lived in the building even longer than I had. If anyone knew what happened around here, it was her. When I mentioned the laundry room, she sighed before I even finished. "Oh, so it finally happened to you." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She leaned against her doorway. "Someone's been stealing laundry cycles for months." I frowned. "You've had it happen too?" She nodded. "Twice. My daughter had it happen once. The college kid on the 3rd floor complained about it a few weeks ago." I stared at her. "Did anyone ever find out who?" She shook her head. "Management says they can't prove anything. They just tell everyone not to touch other people's laundry." Then she smiled sadly. Like the person doing it is suddenly going to grow a conscience. That conversation changed everything. Until then, I'd assumed I was dealing with someone who had a problem with me. Now, it sounded much worse. This wasn't personal. Someone in the building had turned laundry theft into a routine, and nobody had stopped them. The following Monday, I stopped by the leasing office again. This time, I wasn't reporting my own laundry. I asked a different question. "How many complaints have you received about the laundry room?" The assistant manager hesitated. "I'm not really allowed to discuss other residents." "I'm not asking for names. I'm asking if this is a pattern." She looked around the office, lowered her voice. "Between you and me, you're definitely not the first." That was all she needed to say. As I walked back to my apartment, something suddenly clicked. If this had been happening for months, then whoever was doing it had become comfortable. Comfortable people make mistakes. They stop looking over their shoulder. They become predictable. And predictable people eventually get caught. The next Saturday, I changed my routine. Instead of arriving at the same time, I came down nearly 40 minutes earlier than usual. I didn't even bring detergent. I simply sat on a bench outside the laundry room with a cup of coffee, pretending to read emails on my phone. People came in, loaded machines, left. Families, students, an older couple. Everything looked completely normal. Then, about 20 minutes later, a woman I'd never spoken to before walked into the laundry room carrying an empty laundry basket. Empty. Not full, empty. That immediately caught my attention. She wasn't there to wash clothes, she was there, waiting for something. She looked around the room, checked the washing machines one by one, then glanced toward the hallway, almost like she was making sure nobody was watching. I lowered my eyes back to my phone, watching her through the reflection on the screen. She didn't start a washer, she didn't load any clothes. She simply stood there, looking at the countdown timers on several machines. Then she quietly smiled to herself and walked back out. At that exact moment, I realized something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. She wasn't waiting for her laundry. She was waiting for someone else's. I stayed exactly where I was, head down, phone in my hand, pretending to answer emails. Out of the corner of my eye, I watched the woman disappear down the hallway. She hadn't washed a single shirt. She hadn't even opened a detergent bottle. She'd walked into the laundry room, studied the countdown timers, then left. That wasn't someone doing laundry. That was someone checking inventory. I waited another 15 minutes before walking inside. Everything looked normal. Every machine was still running. Nothing had been touched. At least, not yet. I glanced at the digital timers. Several washers had less than 5 minutes remaining. Mine had 4. I suddenly understood exactly how this worked. She didn't steal clothes at random. She waited until the cycles were almost finished. That way, the owner was usually upstairs, the washer became available, and she didn't have to pay for an entire wash cycle. She simply hijacked the last few minutes someone else had already purchased. I walked back upstairs, but instead of cleaning my apartment, I sat beside my front door with my phone, watching the laundry app. The timer slowly counted down. 4 minutes. 3. 2. 1. The cycle ended. I didn't move. Instead, I started a stopwatch. 1 minute passed. Nothing. 2 minutes. Still nothing. 3 minutes. Then, my phone buzzed. A notification from the laundry app. Door opened. I smiled. Got you. I hurried downstairs, not running, just walking quickly enough to arrive before anyone expected me. As I reached the laundry room, I slowed down. The woman was standing with her back toward me. My washer door was open. My clothes had already been pulled out. She was calmly loading her own laundry inside, like she'd done it 100 times before. She never heard me walk in. "Excuse me?" She froze, slowly turned around. She looked to be in her late 40s, perfectly dressed, calm, not embarrassed, not surprised, just annoyed that someone had interrupted her. I pointed toward the washer. "Those are my clothes." She looked down briefly. "Oh. I thought someone abandoned them." I couldn't help laughing. "The cycle ended less than 3 minutes ago." She shrugged. "Well, you weren't here." For a second, I honestly wondered if she'd apologize. Instead, she continued loading her own clothes into the machine, as though I were the one causing a problem. I stared at her. "You're using a cycle I paid for." She looked me straight in the eye. "So?" I blinked. "So? You've already paid. The machine was running anyway. It's not hurting anybody." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I reached into the washer, pulled my wet clothes back out. She sighed dramatically. "Oh, come on. Don't be so dramatic. I'll only be a few minutes." I looked directly at her. "No. You'll be paying for your own wash." For the first time, her friendly mask disappeared. "You know, most people around here don't make such a big deal over something this small." I folded my arms. "That's probably why you've been getting away with it." For several long seconds, neither of us moved. Finally, she grabbed her laundry basket, rolled her eyes, and walked toward another empty washer. This time, she pulled out her phone, opened the payment app, and reluctantly started her own cycle. Before leaving, she looked back at me. "You seriously reported this?" "I haven't." "Yet," she smirked. "They'll never do anything." Then she walked away, leaving me standing beside my soaking wet clothes. I restarted my wash cycle. Again. The third payment in 2 weekends. As the machine filled with water, one thing became painfully clear. Mrs. Alvarez had been right. This woman had done it before. Many times. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't even trying to hide it. She genuinely believed nobody could stop her. And the most dangerous people are the ones who become convinced they're untouchable. As I watched the water begin swirling through my clothes, I made a decision. I wasn't going to argue with her again. The next time we met, I wanted proof. Not just for me, for everyone she'd been stealing from. For the rest of that weekend, I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. Most people around here don't make such a big deal over something this small. That sentence told me everything. She wasn't apologising. She wasn't making excuses. She genuinely believed she had done nothing wrong. Worse, she believed everyone else was the problem for caring. Monday evening, I knocked on Mrs. Alvarez's door again. This time, I wasn't asking questions. I was sharing what had happened. I caught her. Mrs. Alvarez's eyes widened. "You actually saw her?" I nodded. I confronted her. "And?" She admitted it. Mrs. Alvarez slowly shook her head. I knew it. I absolutely knew it. Within 10 minutes, 2 more neighbours joined the conversation. The college student from the 3rd floor and a retired couple from the 2nd. As everyone shared their stories, a pattern began to emerge. The college student spoke first. "I thought I was losing my mind. My detergent kept disappearing." The retired gentleman laughed bitterly. "My dryer sheets too." His wife added, "One weekend we paid for 2 dryers. When we came back, our blankets were sitting on the folding table. Someone else's comforters were drying instead." Everyone looked at one another. Different apartments, different weeks, exactly the same behaviour. This wasn't random. It wasn't an isolated incident. One person had been treating the laundry room like her personal free laundromat. The next morning, I stopped by the leasing office again. This time, I asked to speak directly with the property manager. Her name was Karen Willis. She invited me into her office. I explained everything, including the confrontation. Karen listened quietly, then folded her hands. "So, you actually saw her moving your laundry?" "Yes." "Did anyone else witness it?" "No." She sighed. "That's the problem." "I believe you. But belief isn't enough. If I accuse a resident without evidence, the company could end up with a legal problem." I understood. As frustrating as it was, she was right. Before I left, Karen added something interesting. "If someone could document it, that would be different." I stopped walking. "What do you mean?" She leaned back in her chair. "We're currently waiting for approval to install cameras in the laundry room. But until then, if a resident provides clear evidence, I can investigate." Those words echoed in my head all afternoon. Clear evidence. That was all she needed. The following Saturday, I changed my routine again. This time, I wasn't trying to catch her myself. I wanted to see how confident she'd become. I loaded all 3 washers exactly as usual, started each cycle, then deliberately made sure she saw me leave. As I walked out of the laundry room, I glanced back through the small window in the door. She was standing near the vending machines, pretending to scroll through her phone, waiting. Instead of returning upstairs, I quietly walked down the emergency stairwell on the opposite side of the building. There was a small maintenance hallway with a narrow window overlooking part of the laundry room. Not a perfect view, but enough to see several washing machines. Enough to see the folding tables. Enough to see the woman. I checked the time. 23 minutes remained. Then 20. Then 15. She never left. She simply wandered around the room, occasionally checking her phone, occasionally looking at the washing machines, like a hunter, waiting for the perfect moment. Exactly 3 minutes before my cycles finished, she stood up, walked directly toward my washers. She didn't even hesitate. No checking labels, no looking around. She already knew which machines were mine. My stomach tightened. That meant she'd been watching me from the moment I entered the room. Maybe longer. She wasn't stealing random laundry cycles. She was selecting victims, watching them leave, then moving in with perfect timing. At that moment, I realised something even more disturbing. If she'd become this comfortable, then she'd probably been doing it for months, maybe even years. And if I wanted this to stop, I wasn't just going to need proof. I was going to need proof that no one, not even she, could argue with. The following Saturday, I arrived at the laundry room earlier than usual. Not because I wanted to do laundry, because I had an appointment. At exactly 9 o'clock, property manager Karen Willis quietly met me outside the basement entrance. She wasn't wearing office clothes, just jeans, a grey hoodie, and a baseball cap. "If this woman's really doing what you described," Karen said, "I'd rather see it myself." I nodded. "I think you will." We reviewed the plan one last time. Nothing complicated, nothing deceptive. I would do exactly what I always did. 3 loads, 3 washers, 3 paid cycles. Then I'd leave the laundry room like any normal Saturday. Karen would remain hidden inside the maintenance hallway with a direct view of the washers. She wasn't there to trap anyone. She was simply there to witness whatever happened naturally. If nobody touched my laundry, wonderful. If someone did, there would finally be an independent witness. At exactly 9:18, I loaded my last washer, started all 3 machines through the app, placed my detergent back into my basket, then casually walked out. As I reached the hallway, I resisted the urge to look back. I didn't need to. I already knew she was watching. The question was, would my neighbour take the bait? Karen and I waited in complete silence. She occasionally glanced through the narrow maintenance window. I watched the countdown on my phone. 20 minutes. 15. 10. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Karen whispered, "Someone just came in." I carefully stepped beside her. Without exposing myself, I looked through the edge of the window. It was her. The same woman, same laundry basket, same calm expression. She looked around the room once, twice, then walked directly toward my washing machines. Not someone else's, mine. Karen quietly raised one eyebrow. "So, you weren't exaggerating." I slowly shook my head. I wish I had been. The woman never checked the machine numbers. She never looked at the payment screens. She didn't hesitate for even a second. She already knew exactly which washers belonged to me. She folded her arms, then simply waited, patiently, watching the countdown timers, almost like this had become part of her weekly routine. Karen looked genuinely surprised. "She's waiting for your cycles to finish." I nodded. Every Saturday. 3 minutes later, my phone vibrated. Cycle complete. Almost immediately, the woman moved. She opened my first washer, pulled out my soaking wet clothes, dropped them carelessly into an empty dryer, then did the second, then the third. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't nervous. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never once been challenged. Karen quietly whispered, "Oh, my God." The woman then began loading her own laundry into the washers. 1 load, then another, then a third. Before closing each door, she reached over, picked up my bottle of detergent sitting beside the folding table, and poured detergent into all 3 of her loads. She never even looked around. She simply assumed everything in the room now belonged to her. Karen stared in disbelief. "She's using your detergent too?" I nodded. Every time. Then something happened neither of us expected. Another resident walked into the laundry room carrying a basket. The woman immediately smiled. "Oh, these washers are already taken." The resident looked confused. "I thought they just finished." She laughed. "I've been waiting here." "They're mine." The resident apologized, turned around, and left. Karen slowly looked at me. Her expression had completely changed. This wasn't just someone stealing laundry cycles anymore. This was someone confidently lying to other residents, knowing nobody would question her. Karen quietly took out her phone. Without saying a word, she began recording. Not hidden, not secretly. Simply documenting exactly what was happening in plain sight. The woman had absolutely no idea. She believed she'd successfully stolen another 3 wash cycles. Instead, she had just handed the property manager everything she needed. As Karen lowered her phone, she turned toward me and calmly said, "I've seen enough." For the first time in months, I finally believed those 4 words, because this time, someone with the authority to do something had witnessed everything with her own eyes. Karen didn't confront her immediately. That surprised me. If I had been in her position, I probably would have walked straight into the laundry room. Instead, she quietly put her phone back into her pocket. "Not yet," she whispered. I looked at her. Why? Because I want to know whether this is the first time, or the 50th. She walked directly back to the leasing office. I followed a few minutes later. As soon as we sat down, Karen opened the building's resident management system. She searched the woman's apartment number, then she frowned. "Interesting." "What?" "We've received complaints about this unit before." I leaned forward. "Laundry?" She slowly shook her head. "No." "Packages." Karen opened another report, then another, and another. Most had been closed, not because they were resolved, but because there hadn't been enough evidence. Missing detergent, missing dryer sheets, clothes moved between machines. Packages disappearing from outside apartment doors, residents accusing each other, nothing anyone could prove. Until now. Karen looked at me. "I don't think she's only been stealing your laundry." She printed several complaint summaries and laid them across her desk. The dates stretched back almost 8 months. Different residents, different buildings within the complex, different complaints. But one apartment number appeared again, and again, and again. Apartment 4B. The woman I'd just watched. Later that afternoon, Karen called several residents who had previously filed laundry complaints. One by one, they arrived at the leasing office. Mrs. Alvarez, the college student, the retired couple, even a young father I'd never met before. Karen asked each person the same question. "When your laundry was moved, did anything else disappear?" The answers were surprisingly similar. "My detergent, my dryer sheets, my fabric softener, my laundry basket, my expensive wool dryer balls." Nobody had lost anything valuable enough to call the police, but together, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Karen leaned back in her chair. "This isn't about laundry anymore. It's theft. Repeated theft, against multiple residents, over many months." Then she smiled slightly. "And now, we finally have a witness." The following Monday, Apartment 4B received a written notice requiring the resident to attend a lease compliance meeting. The meeting wasn't optional. Every leaseholder agreed to attend one if management requested it. Karen invited me only as a witness. I wasn't there to argue, or accuse anyone. I simply described exactly what I'd seen. Then Karen played the video she'd recorded. The room became very quiet. The woman watched herself, opening my washers, removing my clothes, using my detergent, loading her own laundry, telling another resident the machines belonged to her. When the video ended, she folded her arms. Finally, she spoke. "So?" Karen calmly replied. "So?" "Would you like to explain why you were using another resident's paid laundry cycles?" The woman shrugged. "Everyone does it." Karen didn't react. "No." "They don't." Then she placed another folder on the table. Inside were 8 months of complaints. Laundry, detergent, packages, statements from residents, copies of incident reports, and finally, Karen slid my printed payment history across the table. 3 paid wash cycles, every Saturday, week after week. For the first time since I'd met her, the woman looked nervous. Not because she'd been caught, because she had finally realized this wasn't just one angry neighbor anymore. It was an entire building that had quietly been putting together pieces of the same puzzle. And now, every single piece was sitting on the table in front of her. The meeting lasted less than 30 minutes. When it was over, Karen asked me to wait outside for a few minutes. I sat quietly in the hallway. Through the closed office door, I couldn't hear every word, only muffled voices. Occasionally, the woman raised hers. Karen never did. About 15 minutes later, the office door opened. The woman walked out without saying a word. She wouldn't even look at me. She clutched her laundry basket so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Then she disappeared down the hallway. I never saw that confident smile again. Karen invited me back into her office. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "If you hadn't kept reporting it, we never would have connected all the complaints." I smiled. I honestly thought I was the only one. "So did everyone else," Karen replied. "That's how people like her get away with things. They make each victim think they're the only target." She opened a folder. Inside was the final decision. Apartment 4B had received a formal lease violation for repeated theft of shared laundry services and interference with other residents' property. One more violation of any kind, and management would begin eviction proceedings under the lease agreement. That wasn't the only consequence. Beginning the following week, the apartment complex introduced several new policies. Small security cameras were installed inside the laundry room. Nothing invasive, only covering the entrances, exits, and the rows of machines. Each washer now displayed the apartment number that started the paid cycle on a small digital screen. Management also posted new notices throughout the room. Removing another resident's laundry before the cycle is complete, or using a paid cycle without authorization, may result in lease violations. The message couldn't have been clearer. The free ride was over. Mrs. Alvarez knocked on my door the first Saturday after the cameras were installed. "You ready?" she asked with a grin. "For what?" "To actually finish laundry in one trip." We both laughed. That morning, for the first time in months, I loaded 3 washers, started all 3 cycles, went back upstairs, returned 30 minutes later. Every piece of clothing was exactly where I'd left it. No one had touched a thing. It felt ridiculous. How satisfying something so ordinary could be. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere in the laundry room completely changed. People started talking to each other again. Neighbours who had barely exchanged greetings before now chatted while folding clothes. Someone even taped a handwritten sign above the folding table. "Please respect your neighbours." Nobody signed it. Nobody had to. Everyone knew why it was there. As for the woman from apartment 4B, she still lived in the building for a while, but things were different. She always waited until the laundry room was completely empty before coming downstairs. She never touched another machine unless she'd paid for it herself. She carried her own detergent, her own dryer sheets, her own laundry basket. And every single time she walked into that room, she glanced up at the security cameras first. Old habits die hard. A few months later, Mrs. Alvarez told me she'd moved out. Whether it was because of the lease violation, or because she no longer felt comfortable living among neighbours who knew exactly what she'd been doing, I honestly don't know. And to be truthful, it didn't matter. By then, the problem had already been solved. Looking back, people sometimes ask if I regret not getting revenge sooner. The answer is no, because revenge wasn't what finally fixed the situation. Evidence did. I could have unplugged machines, ruined clothes, started arguments in the laundry room. None of that would have changed anything. It would have become one person's word against another's. Instead, I waited. I documented. I let the truth speak for itself, and in the end, the person who believed she was clever enough to steal from everyone was defeated by something much simpler: accountability. Sometimes, justice doesn't arrive with flashing lights or dramatic courtroom speeches. Sometimes, it arrives in the quiet hum of a washing machine that finally finishes exactly where you left it.